Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SAG-AFTRA podcast. I'm Duncan, Crabtree-Ireland, National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA. Our guest today, and I'm so excited about this, is legendary filmmaker James Cameron. Over the past 4 decades, James has created some of the most memorable and innovative movies ever made, from The Terminator and Aliens to Titanic and Avatar. His films mix rich storytelling with vivid, immersive worlds that stay with viewers long after the film ends. Jim is celebrated for the way he uses cutting-edge technology in his work, but he's always been clear about where the line is. He's managed to make his stunning Avatar movies using zero generative AI for the writing and the performances. He's also spoken often about the value of actors and the need for firm, creative guardrails around AI. His widely anticipated film, Avatar, Fire and Ash, arrives in theaters December 19th, and I got a chance to see an early screening of it a few days ago, and I'll just say, wow, not the least of which because I signed an ironclad NDA, so I'm sure you'll appreciate that. Jim, welcome to the podcast. And I just want to say we're here at Lightstorm Studios surrounded by props and pieces from your iconic films, and it's an amazing place to do this podcast.
Well, Duncan, thanks for inviting me to talk about, presumably these very important issues. And yes, and welcome to our museum where you've got Titanic here and an amp suit from Avatar over there and even the Alien Queen over there. So there's a bit of history in this room.
And I'm mindful that I've got a Terminator looking directly at me, but I'm not going to let it stop me from asking you about AI.
His weapon is only aimed in your general direction. I wouldn't take it personally.
Okay. Now, you're known as a very technology advanced director and person, actually, not just director. But you've been very clear that you made Fire and Ash without generative AI. Why is it important for you to make that known?
I think it's critical because we're in a time where the lines are getting blurred between different applications of technology, and we've been working for 20 years in a mode of production that I think of as highly actor-centric, highly artist-centric, using performance capture. And I think people conflate anything that's done with computers as being part of generative AI. And of course, we're all concerned, I think, in the industry. I certainly am, and I know SAG is for sure, concerned about the replacement of actors, the misuse of an actor's voice or their likeness and so on, the misuse of characters created by an actor and identified with an actor, and what we're going to do about that. So, I guess it's really kind of an interesting time because on Avatar 1 and Avatar 2, I kept what we did hidden behind the curtain. I wanted it to be magical. I wanted the characters almost to sort of exist as themselves, right? And I think I did a disservice to my amazing cast by doing that. And so now I'm being quite vocal about pulling that curtain aside, showing how it's a highly actor-driven process. And if you'll give me a moment, I'll even make the case, maybe later in our discussion, that I believe it's the purest form of cinema acting. But we can get to that in due course. But I think it's really, really important to distinguish between what we do with performance capture and what we've been doing for the last 20 years and what you'll be seeing in Avatar, Fire and Ash, and generative AI, text-to-video models and anything that's, based on this kind of large training data sets that are maybe can replace actors. Not maybe, can absolutely replace actors. You can make a film right now with no actors that appears to have humans in it, and that can be done. And these tools are getting more sophisticated before our eyes. So what are the guardrails and what are the standards, the sort of ethical standards that we're going to put in place? And I think, by the way, we should do it, meaning the guilds, the industry should police itself. I don't think we should look to state or federal government to come in with a blunt hammer and try to, maybe there are things we can ask them to do to support us, but I think it needs to be driven by our needs from within the industry and our value system.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because from my point of view, that's been the only effective way to put guardrails and rules in place so far. I mean, if you look at the contracts, we negotiated the film and television contract back in 2023.
Right.
It has 16 pages of AI provisions in it, very detailed rules about replication and even generative AI. And if we look around, the EU has an AI Act, but here in the United States, there's no federal law at all on this.
Right.
We have some laws in states like California, New York, Illinois, Tennessee, Alabama. But generally there is not comprehensive regulation, and we would have nothing in place if we hadn't worked in the industry to.
Yeah, and you and your negotiating team are uniquely poised to be able to continue to refine that as we understand the capabilities of the technology going forward. But I think we also have to create a culture within our business of what we celebrate. What is our sense of purpose? What are we here to do as artists? As actors. I'm not an actor, but I work with actors. I love working with actors. You open with something interesting, which is people think of me as a technology guy, which is true. But I can separate that hemisphere of my brain from my first of all, there's overlap with creativity, but secondly, there's a part of my creativity on the Avatar movies, for example, that is non-technical. I write, I create the characters, and I work with actors to breathe them to life, and I do that in a performance capture environment, which at first glance seems very technical, and yet from an actor's perspective is highly liberating. Stephen Lang, one of my cast members who plays Colonel Quaritch masterfully, I'd like to point out, calls it the infinite space. He says, when you come into the volume, I think there's a Shakespearean quote that he quotes about, within the nutshell, you can have infinite space. And because we can do anything. We can go anywhere, we can be anywhere. We can be in the ocean, we can be in the rainforest, we can be in the mountains, we could be flying in a vehicle, we could be in a spacecraft, we can be anywhere. So it's infinite, right? And it's very freeing and liberating. And I also think it's important for people to think of performance capture not as character. It's a way for the actors to create a character, but what's its application? You wouldn't use it to create a talking dinosaur. You'd use it to create a humanoid character that historically would have been done with makeup. So if you think of, we all grew up with Star Trek, and little foam ears on Spock, and little foam foreheads on the Klingons, and so on, and it's that. It's that which can be performed by an actor plausibly, where we're interested in their performance, the nuance, the detail of the performance, that heartfelt, truthful, authentic moment of performance. That's what we capture, right? As opposed to doing it photographically, where yes, you'll get that heartfelt performance, but you've got to do it 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 times to account for coverage and all of the other. We don't do coverage. That's the beauty of performance capture. So I think it's good for people to think, okay, why would a director who's shepherded and empowered Academy Award-winning performances, since the earliest days of my career, be attracted to this? It's because I get to work with the actors 100%. I'm not distracted by the cinematography and all of the physical exigencies of production. Is the sun setting? Am I running out of time? Are we going to be able to get the Musco in place? Are we going to get the crane? We're going to get the track down in time? All these. Do I have to go again for focus? All of that stuff is set aside. It's funny. I summed it up for Oliver Stone once because he was touring the facility, and I said, "Well, you see, we've uncoupled cinematography from performance." And he said, "Why the would you want to do that?" And then, it really made me think, okay, fine. He came up in a certain way, and most of us did. I mean, I was a live action director, and I still am. And there's live action on the Avatar film, so I'm never going to lose my love of that. But what draws me to performance capture is I worry about all the lighting and all the nerdy detail later. My lens choice, my depth of field, what's my exposure, how much backlight, how many this and that and everything, the bounce, how are we lighting the scene? All of that, I do all that later. I don't let it get in the actor's way, So I think it's very healthy to think of it as digital makeup. It takes the place of what would have been done with foam rubber. I imagine what an Elephant Man could be, where John Hurt is not buried under so much rubber, but he's acting through a character that's different than his own physiology. And that's what we do with our Na'vi and our avatar characters.
Last week, you were kind enough to host some of the SAG-AFTRA elected leadership and some members and some staff here, and we got a chance to actually watch you work in that process with some of the actors from the Avatar films, both the lead actors and also the troupe that you have. And it was really fascinating to see that almost the entirety of the time that you all spent together, and it was almost 2 hours, was really focused on developing the acting, the characters. It was, the technology was almost in the background as you engaged with the actors. It was a fascinating thing to see.
The scene's the thing, right? I mean, the actors come in, they've got their character. You saw actors who were mature in their characters, had spent years in their characters. We would, for new people coming in, we'd be spending time on character. What does it mean? How do you move? Where are you in your life? All of those things, and I'd be helping them prep. But they were able to come in and hit the ground running. Even so, we didn't know those scenes. And I did that on purpose. I actually wrote new scenes the week before, gave them the pages a couple of days before, so that they had the typical kind of preparation they might have on a feature, where we've done a table read through months earlier. Now we're coming in to do, scene X, Y, or Z. They may have forgotten things from the read through. On a live action film, you might do a week, or if you're lucky, a couple of weeks of rehearsal, and you really work the film from end to end. We don't have to do that. We can do it the day of, because performance capture is the least expensive mode of production that we have on an Avatar film. It's much, much cheaper than the live action, right? So I can afford to literally sit down, I'll sit cross-legged on the floor right in the middle of the set while, the camera guys, the reference camera guys are over at Crafty, and we'll just talk. Maybe an hour, maybe more, talk about the scene, where we are in the greater story arc, and so on. Then we'll stand it up, and it becomes very much like theater rehearsal. Not even theater, like where the audience is there. Theater rehearsal, you haven't found it yet. You don't quite know what the heart of the scene is. What's that pivot? What's that moment? And it'll be a different moment for the different, actors in the scene. We had Zoe Saldana, we had Sam Worthington, we had Sigourney Weaver. So I wrote a scene that was a family scene, the two parents dealing with their daughter. And if you were at the morning session, it was quite dramatic. There were a lot of tears, and a lot of emotion bubbling up in that scene. Of course, they were able to drop right back into character, which was great. But that didn't mean we understood the scene.
It changed a lot, even during that 2 hours.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I'll spend a few minutes blocking with my virtual camera, which everybody makes a big deal about it being VR. It is VR, but I'm not in the VR world for very long. I just look at it and I say, okay, let's turn the staging a little bit so I can frame you against the doorway. I can see the moonlight coming in. That'll be nice. There's a fire over here, or whatever it is. And then I'll paint that picture. The actors used to be quite interested in what that looked like, and they'd go over to the monitor and they'd get a sense from the virtual image of what was around them, But I noticed lately that they've lost interest in that. Sam, for example, will go over and watch his performance in close-up, because we have these reference cameras, handheld HD video reference cameras that get close-ups of the actors in every moment, so that in the editing room later, I know what they've done, and I can edit that performance just like you normally would edit a performance, to get the best moments, the moments where they're always brilliant, but the moments where they were even more brilliant, or where they really stuck the landing on the moment, where I feel it later in the cutting room. That's the thing that I want to then later. See, I'll later do all this with my virtual camera. I'll create all the shots. I'll do the Steadicam. I'll do the slow dolly track in on a tight lens. I'll do the wide shot. I'll do the helicopter shot. All that stuff happens later. It doesn't get in our way, which is what I think is so fun about it as a writer-director, because I'm just all about character and where we are in the story, And the beauty of it is, for them, first of all, we can just go and go. We can just restart the scene as much as we want, and the other thing is they've got almost 100% of my attention. I have to keep an eye on the reference cameras so that we don't block them, because I want to make sure that we're getting good coverage, But it's almost like shooting sports, if you will. You don't quite know where the action's going to go, but you have people placed so that you can get it wherever it goes. And then that becomes invisible to the actor as well. The actor doesn't know if they're going to be in a close-up or a wide shot at any given moment. And you know how I think everybody a little bit modifies their performance or maybe saves some energy for the close-up. When everything's a close-up, nothing's a close-up, right? Because you've got that head rig on, so that boom is right there, that camera is right there. It's image-based. We call it image-based facial performance capture. So it's based on shooting an image from this little boom that's on the head rig. So you're always in a close-up.
You also said, I think during that session, you said, in a way, it's a lot like rehearsing for a theater, live theater production. And maybe that's part of the reason. But can you talk a little bit about why you feel that way?
Well, I think when you come in to, I haven't broke down a play with actors since I was in college, right? But I'm familiar with the process. And you come in early days, it's understanding the play, understanding the character, and the blocking is not that important, and it starts to kind of shape itself as you go along, as you get up from the table, as you stand it up, as you're moving around. Sometimes you need that movement. Sometimes the moment, the emotion compels you to move. Other times it becomes stillness, or it can be even a collapse into a physical position. And I don't want to over adjudicate that before the fact. So I don't come in with storyboards. I don't come in with previs. I don't say, you were going to stand there and say the line and you're going to be seated over here. It's like, we'll find what the scene wants. I create a space that's the set. Maybe it's a home like it was the Sully's home for you. It might be a spot in the jungle. It might be adjacent to a vehicle. It might be in some high-tech structure. Who knows? Whatever the scene requires. And then let the actors find it, And there's a scene in movie 2 where Sigourney wanted to hop up on top of the tank and look in from above at her mother in the tank, and we just figured out how to do that. She, when I wrote it, she was just looking on the side, So I free my mind. When I walk in, the actors come in with their minds free, but their character's very, very close to them, and then they just start to play it out. And sometimes a scene will go through an evolution, which you saw, where it might be quite frantic and there might be a lot of energy and a lot of shouting, and then it quiets down and it becomes more intimate, more internal, all of those things. And maybe some of the movement isn't so important after a while. But I don't try to staple their feet to the floor with marks. Like, that's the first, in live action, the first thing you try to do is get a blocking so you can start lighting, because you can't do anything until you've lit, right? Well, what if you didn't have to light? And what if you don't have to turn the lighting around? And what if you don't have to go again for your reverses? So you've got even a simple two-hander scene, actors acting their heart out and the camera's on their back, because they're giving it. They're bringing it for the other actor and honoring them, helping them create their performance, and the camera's on their back. Okay, now we're going to come around, go to your trailer, we're going to relight the whole thing and turn the lighting around and stage the background and get the camera moved done, come back in a half hour, 45 minutes, and then we'll pick it up from your side, and then you got to do it all again. We eliminate all that, right? I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other. There are certain things in live action, maybe there's a little bit of wardrobe or something that you cling to that helps define your character that you can use. Maybe I don't think the head rig is a big encumbrance once people get used to it, which takes about a half day to a day. But, it has its own specific things, and live action has its own specific deficits. They're both fun. I like them both. I love to operate camera, so in live action, I look forward to that. I'll be in there, handheld, maybe arm's length or maybe 2 arms length from the actors, so I feel like I'm right there. I don't like this Video Village stuff. I don't go hang out at Video Village. To me, that already introduces a wall, a barrier between you and where the real creation is happening.
Yeah, with the technology that you're using, I mean, even during the performance of the scene, you can be quite close, and as long as as long as you're not blocking the reference camera, then
if I'm not blocking a reference camera and I'm not intruding into the actor's space via eye line or whatever, they're pretty used to me right now. I joke with them that they're like teenagers and I'm their parent and they don't see me. I have 5 kids. I've been with them through their teenage years, and you basically don't exist.
I have 5 kids too. That's a lot.
Unless they want something.
That's correct.
Then you exist briefly.
Then you exist immediately and persistently. Can I just say thank you also for using the term performance capture, because way back, you came to our negotiations in 2007 and 2008 to help explain performance capture technology across the table.
Yeah.
And, it took...
John Lando and I came in with
with
a clip. We showed you a reel, I think.
You did. And I think, we've been consistently using that language since then. And it took 15 years, but we did finally get it into the agreement with the studios and the streamers. And I think it's so important because of the distinction that you're drawing, which is there is a performance happening there. This is not just, and a lot of people like to just use the shorthand mocap or motion capture, but it's not just motion that we're talking about. There's so much more.
Well, John Lando would be very quick to point out that actors don't do motion. They do emotion. But even if we're looking for, let's say, stunt motion, like somebody's going to perform a stunt, or either our troupe or our actual stunt team, we still record the face. And that's because eye movement is so critical. Even if we later separately record the actual principal actor's performance of that moment. So if you think about it, what do we do historically? We have a stunt double come in, do the stunt. Then we bring the principal actor back in ADR later to do breaths and efforts or yells or dialogue that might happen during that stunt, right? And then we marry those two performances together, essentially. And that's been sort of the history of the business for the last 100 years. So we take it a step farther. We will do, instead of ADR, we'll do what we call FPR, which is facial performance replacement. So the actor can watch what the stunt double was doing and not only vocalize the breaths and efforts, but actually provide the facial expression for that. But we still need the stunt player's eye movement, because as your body moves, as your head moves, so your eyes move, right? And so the actor then doesn't have to try to synchronize their movement. They just have to create the emotion. So it's beyond just getting ADR. It's also getting the facial expression as well. And that allows us to not have to hide the stunt performer's face, silhouette or wide shot or whatever it is. We can sort of see a little bit more of the character. So we never lose contact with the character. And I empower the actors, to do that. I also empower them to do their own stunts when they want to, and when we collectively think it's safe and something they've trained for. For example, Sam Worthington is very good with action, very good with weapons and movement and falls and fight and all that sort of thing. So we encourage that, but we also want to make sure that it's always done safely.
If you had let's say a young or new actor who was lucky enough to book a role, maybe just as a day player on one of your projects, what kind of advice, probably they're not going to get to ask you this, so I want to ask you for them, what kind of advice would you give them about how to come into that set, especially in this performance capture environment, and be able to deliver that best performance?
I'd say, ask any questions, anything that's on your mind about the environment, and I can take you through that, and I can show you everything. I can show you, using the virtual camera, the space that you're in. I find kids are so imaginative, they don't have a problem with it at all. Our youngest player was Trinity, and she came in at the age of 7, and boom, she was right in. It was crazy. I find almost in a way the younger they are, the more they just adapt to it, because they live in a world of imagination. I mean, all actors live in a world of imagination, and I don't think there's any sanctity to a physical set, because by the time you're in there actually working and acting, there's ladders in the way and lights in the way, and you can barely see the set half the time. So you still rely on your imagination to tune all that stuff out. I would also give the advice that you don't have to use a stage whisper. Just whisper. It can be as small as you want it to be. It can be as imperceptible. I think there might be a tendency to think that, there's no camera around me, so if it feels like theater, I need to be a little bigger. I need to be a little showier, maybe, and you don't. The subtlest nuance will be picked up down to, a millimeter level. And then, our downstream system has gotten so good that we miss nothing going into the final character. And I think, you saw our side-by-side demo
Yes.
where you see what the actor did in the moment, and then you see how it translated into their CG character, their CG makeup, if you will. And you can see that there's zero diminishment that I can measure with my eye.
Almost the more subtle, the better in a certain way, because it's so human.
Yeah.
That subtlety, I think.
Exactly. Things they do with their eyes, a slight narrowing, a slight tension in the mouth, things that I'm sure as an actor you're not even aware is happening. And we were able to capture all that and reproduce it into that. Because the character is the character. It's not the actor's face precisely, but we try to get it as close as possible, especially in the lower face, because all the muscles around the mouth and so much expression that forms there, we want that to be one-to-one. But obviously the eyes are bigger, the head is wider to accommodate those huge eyes. There's that feline nose, which behaves a little differently than. But the little triangle of sadness, the area around the brow and the upper nose and the eyes and all that actually becomes quite a bit of a broader canvas in the Avatar characters, because their foreheads are bigger, their upper part of their nose is very feline, very wide, and so in a funny way, sometimes the characters are even more expressive, and we don't try to drive that. We don't try to push it. We don't encourage. We almost try to take the concept of animation out of it. And while it's being executed by really, really top animators, their job is to stay out of the way and use their skills to perfect what we call the algorithm. So for each character, as the data starts coming in, we start trying to perfect the character, the CG character, so that it gets all those nuances. And then after a while, it becomes kind of an automated process. We just feed that in, and the character does what the character's supposed to do. It's quite amazing. It takes a while, it's quite amazing. On the first film, there was a lot of keyframe to try to not miss anything, but we're way past that now. I don't want to say it's 100% automated. We still have to keep an eye on it, and we still have to babysit and make sure something's not missing. And that's a little bit more true, let's say, with Sigourney, because with her now 70, young 70-something face, she's not 15 anymore, so her facial muscles behave a little bit differently. So we have to go from Sigourney at 70, 71 across the period of capture for Fire and Ash, back to a 15-year-old version of Sigourney, which is all based on whatever archival materials we could find in her, and then translate that to the character. So it's a little bit of a two-step process. But we feel, and she feels, that we've captured her perfectly. She loves her character, by the way, and she comes to life when she enters the volume. You can feel a youthfulness of spirit that bubbles up in her. I think you could
absolutely. We saw that.
See it. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
There's a moment in Fire and Ash where you see Sigourney in live action juxtaposed with her with her character, her 15-year-old character.
Yeah.
How did it feel to you to see them? I mean, did it feel special to see them side by side?
So
to me,
much fun.
It hit me in that moment how amazing the performance she's delivering to span those generations. It was just very powerful.
And you hear a difference in the way she speaks when she's her human character, Grace Augustine. Same thing in movie 2 when she appears as Grace on the screen, and as Kiri, she's watching her mother just doing a science log, but she's loving this image of her mother that she never met. She never met her mother. She's actually was born from the avatar of her mother, Grace. And you see the two side by side in a scene that we can't talk about. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And you can hear that they speak differently.
Yes.
They are different characters.
It's a beautiful testament to the fact that this is acting as powerful, as intense, as connective as any. Type of role.
I think part of my decision to show the process in detail and look behind the scenes of the magic was to, honor the actors and maybe try to overturn this idea that it's an inferior form of acting, or it's a contaminated form of acting, or it's something that maybe gives us as filmmakers some kind of diabolical control to make it anything we want later, that the actors are just sort of pumping in some kind of performance feedstock into an animation process. I believe that to be true when you're voicing a character, for a fully animated film where you're not actually performing the character. I remember I was talking to Meryl Streep once, and she said, well, I'd like to come in and voice a character for one of your films. And it's kind of like, well, you don't want to argue with Meryl,
No.
But I said, no, see, this is the problem. People think that they just come in for a couple of days and read the script out loud and are voicing a character. And I don't mean to take away from that. That's the backbone of how purely animated films work. And then a committee of animators go to town, bringing the character into physical life or visual life. That's not what we do. When you see somebody doing something in one of these Avatar films, they've done it. They've done it. They've been underwater. They've ridden a creature underwater. Everything you see is either done by the principal performer or done by a stunt player in the case of it being a little bit dangerous. But the actors really stepped up on Way of Water and Fire and Ash for the underwater scenes, holding their breath and so on. And, while you don't think of Fire and Ash as being a movie that's got a lot of underwater, it does, of course, because it's a continuation of the same story in the same environments.
You have a history of working with some of the same actors over a long period of time. And I was thinking about this as we were discussing Sigourney Weaver's performance. What is it about an actor that makes you want to work with them over the course of decades? Like what drives you to do that?
I think it's the mutual trust that's been built and the openness of the discussion. There's no tension around whether, I can bring in an idea or they can bring in an idea. And I've been blessed, maybe with a sixth sense in casting, to cast people that are good, not only right for the character, but are just good and good people, good people. I don't want to work with prima donnas. I don't want to work with people that are difficult in their process. And I think I have a nose for that because I spend a lot of time in the audition process. And the first thing I look for is, will they volley with me? Can we just play a little table tennis here? I throw out an idea, they knock it back, do something cool, do something that I wasn't expecting, maybe that they weren't even expecting when they came in. I think any pro actor will prepare a scene and they'll come in ready to show something to the filmmaker. And that's great. Know your lines, kind of basic, right? But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what happens next. Okay, now let's play it. Now let's play the scene on fire or standing on your head or, I'm just giving stupid examples. But what if it was this? What if you didn't hate that person? What if you secretly loved them? How would you do the scene differently? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you did that.
That's what we were doing.
Absolutely.
You saw it, yeah.
You and Sigourney and Sam together there was honestly, for me, there was so much dialogue between y'all sort of building the scene together, and it changed so much from the very first to the end. And that was really fascinating to see how confident everyone was in your group of working together to build out the scene, to try out ideas, to share their concerns or thoughts. It was fascinating.
Yeah, and there's a shorthand, and because the first Avatar was so successful, there was a lot of pressure on me to do sequels, and I didn't know if I wanted to do sequels. To have the bar be set that high, anything that we did subsequently might be considered lesser, and I kind of shunned it for a couple of years. What drew me back was what we call, and people laugh at this, but it's a real thing, what we call the Avatar family. I mean, I kind of feel like we're in year 7 of Friends or something like that, where everybody just knows each other so well and enjoys working with each other and respects each other so much and feels fearless to go anywhere. And sometimes when we bring new actors into the process, like when Una Chaplin joined us on Fire and Ash, she looked around and she saw this family that she was dropping into the center of, and she felt accepted right away. And of course, she turned in such a spectacular
She
performance.
held nothing back in that performance.
Yeah, well, you've seen the film, so you know, and it's not her at all. I mean, you'd think she was the worst person in the world based on what you see, and she's not at all. She's actually a very spiritual person. She's part indigenous herself. She's got a lot of her network of people in the Amazon and in Peru and so on are shamanic practitioners, plant medicine people and so on. She's actually extremely spiritual, very, very grounded. But she was able to sort of draw upon all that to create the sort of dark arts that her character practices in the movie. But, it's that sixth sense. I think, when I look back over my career, it might just be incredible luck, statistically improbable luck, or maybe I just have a nose for people that are, number one, super talented, number two, flexible, fluid, creative in the moment, and number three, not assholes. That's my one rule.
That seems like a good
rule now.
You've also, you've been pretty outspoken about safety, and A, thank you for that. But B, I guess I wanted to ask, how do you feel about safety protocols, both in this, performance capture world and in the live action world in general? And do you say anything, or how do you help performers feel empowered to speak up when they feel like something may not be safe? Or
look, I've been doing this for a long time. I started out in action, crashing cars, blowing stuff up, and the safety is absolutely the most important thing. Nobody should get injured for a movie, and nobody should. I mean, we've got great stunt methodology, and stunt people are highly professional at the things they know, whether it's driving a car, flipping a car, doing stunt stuff, fire stuff, whatever it is. So you have actors that are very willing to hand that to a stunt person and know their limitations. And then sometimes you have actors that want to do a stunt that they shouldn't be doing. And it ultimately boils down to, I think, the stunt coordinator has to make a call and the director has to back their play. Or maybe the director makes the call and the stunt coordinator needs to back their play and the actor needs to be talked out of it, sometimes. Other times an actor may be reluctant to do something that's quite safe, and then they need to be, I don't want to say talked into it, but they need to be made comfortable. And you do that through rehearsal, preparation. Fortunately on a feature film, usually at least a well-funded feature film, you've got the time. You've got the time to prepare ahead of time, and you'll put the actor with the stunt team well in advance. They can do all the fight choreography, and they can physically train, because it takes strength and timing and coordination for a lot of action roles. And there are actors that excel at that, and actors that are doing it for the first time. And then you've got to kind of hold their hand a little bit and assure them that it's safe. And I think you mentioned it, the most critical thing, give them permission to cut at any moment. The second that they feel something's wrong, just cut. Just put your hands up. Just cut. Just say cut. Just step out of it. Because you've got to have that. Everybody, has that sort of the show must go on mentality, or we've got to get the shot, or I've got to do the thing. And I've been blessed, I think, throughout, a 40-plus year career doing action, that I've never had anybody get seriously hurt. There have been times where we've come close, where little things that we did right before the take actually made a huge difference and kept it from becoming a tragedy. So there's always that thing where I'll walk in live action, I'll walk any stunt, I'll walk the path of the stunt person or the stunt vehicle or whatever. And when everybody else signs off, I still do my own pass, because I always feel like out there lurking is an X factor, the thing nobody thought of. And maybe I'll think of it. And sometimes I have, and sometimes I'll walk it, and it's all been very carefully prepared. But I think everybody has to own it up and down the chain.
Well, it's something that not a lot of people know, but I want to say it, and I want you to know it's appreciated, is that because of the unique way that you've made the Avatar films, it didn't always interact well with the way our health insurance is structured. And so actually, your company and Disney worked with us to establish a way for actors working for multiple years on the same project to address this. And I think having the employer side step forward to do that in cooperation with us made a huge difference. And it
thanks.
meant that the actors got to have their health insurance, and the caps didn't. I won't go into all the technical details because this is beyond the scope of this podcast, but I just think it's important as a union when we call out employers for things that aren't good practices, that when they do the right thing, I think it's also important to say that. And I know the actors who work for you appreciate that.
Well, your rules and your guidelines at the time when we were making Avatar in 06, 07, 08, when we were talking to SAG, you'd had 100 years of experience in how movies are made and all the ways in which employers and studios have taken advantage of actors and all the ways in which you've pushed back. And we were doing something fundamentally new. And so we were on unknown terrain, and we talked to you, you talked to us, you saw what we were doing, and then, I think ultimately it was just pragmatic solutions, that we worked out. And to the extent that we're in new territory at any given point with new technologies and new workflows, we should always have that openness.
You were probably, ironically, in a way, you warned us about AI in a way with the Terminator movies, and I can't tell you how many panels I've been on where people have referenced Skynet. Right. But AI is here. Generative AI is here.
Skynet's not here yet, but Skynet's coming.
It could come if we don't do the right thing, right? I guess I'm sort of eager to hear from you how you see AI affecting actors specifically, or all of us in general, and what your thoughts are about how we move into the future, knowing it's not like we can't stop AI from happening. So what we've got to do is figure out how we engage with it to make it right. Yeah,
so I'm going to set aside the Skynet problem, which is artificial general intelligence, or you can call it artificial superintelligence. When we have a synthetic intelligence that's equal to or greater than ours, and the second it becomes greater, it's going to accelerate and so on, and how that plays a role in our destiny as a species. I think that's not something that you or I need to worry about right now with respect to the entertainment industry. I think with respect to film and television, generative AI is both a promising new area and a very dangerous area. Because if you can create characters from scratch and you don't need actors at all, that's never been possible before. It's been possible in animation, right? In pure animation, TV shows, Saturday morning TV cartoons all the way up to the very high-end Pixar and Disney animation studios type stuff. It's possible to create a character. You still need somebody to do the voice, except now you don't. And now you don't even need somebody to physically perform a character. To me, there's big warning bells going off all around us, and I think actors are right to be concerned. And I don't think it's a question of what we should be allowed to do. I think it's a question of what we should want to do. What do we want to do as artists? What are our values? How do we celebrate creativity? How do we celebrate human purpose? How do we not put people out of work? In dangerous economic times. I think these are very critical considerations. And I think, look, it's been in front of you guys. You've already struck on it, and you've gotten a lot of concessions, and you've created guidelines. I don't need to tell you what to do, because I think you've already done it and or are going to continue to do it. I think that we also shouldn't be Luddites, and we shouldn't close our mind to the places where it actually can be beneficial to the industry. And for example, the kind of big imaginative films that I like to make aren't getting greenlit these days, or they're only getting greenlit if they happen to be a sequel or some kind of ongoing IP that's been around for a long time. Batman, Superman, that sort of thing. Marvel, Star Wars. I would put Avatar in that category. Although the particular film that's being released now, I started 10 years ago, before this was all even a big issue, before COVID chopped the top quarter off of our theatrical attendance, or actually just wiped it out for a year, and then it's never quite recovered before streaming hit it, and it's kind of a 1-2 punch, and we're still down 30 to 35% from where we used to be, and we seem to have plateaued. We don't seem to be rebounding, and yet costs keep creeping up as they do over time, and so And now we're in a unique scenario where it's kind of event movies and blue chip IP that are getting people out of their homes to go to the cinemas, and those are the kind of movies that are getting more and more difficult to greenlight. I'm just afraid the entire theatrical experience is going to implode. So we've got to bring VFX costs down. Are there places in those VFX workflows that generative AI can be helpful? And I'm not talking about, I always see it always starting with performance, always starting with the actors, whether it's in performance capture or live action. But can it be helpful in previs? Can it be helpful in VFX? Can it replace blue screen? I believe it can, right? Because segmentation is a way in which the AI can identify the foreground without having to use color matting to separate the foreground, right? So maybe we can start replacing some of these menial tasks and freeing our digital artists to move faster. So, for example, if I could do an Avatar movie in 2 years instead of 4 years, what would we do the next day? We'd start the next Avatar movie, or we'd start something else equally intriguing, and those artists would just power right on doing what they do. So I don't see it as replacing artists. I see it as making us more effective, more efficient, maybe bringing costs into line with where the marketplace is right now as theatrical is contracting and budgets are contracting. So everybody flocked over to streaming when streaming was just buying market share by throwing ridiculous amounts of money at filmmakers, at writers, at producers, showrunners, and so on. And now it's all retrenched back, and now you don't get those budgets anymore. So we're sort of caught between horses. We got lured away from theatrical to streaming, and now we're not getting the budgets there, and then theatrical's contracted as well and can't justify the budget. So we got to do something. So I just would encourage people to think in very cautious terms about the misuse of Gen AI and in open-minded terms about how it might be used productively and ethically to help us at a crisis point in the business.
We've been talking about augmentation, not replacement, as sort of a shorthand for what we hope to see, but hopefully also not mediocrity. And I think, the example of what you're doing, it's not Gen AI, obviously, as you've said, but making sure that we have incredible things for people to see in the cinema, that's key to making it all work.
I think it not only starts with performance, but it starts with the thing that generative AI can never do is the unique individual's lived experience. It can only do that which, you see, I think you drive toward mediocrity with generative AI because it's based on everybody's experience, every performance that's ever been done, every movie that's ever been done. And when you put that all into a blender, you're going to get the mean. You're going to get the average as opposed to the unique. And what do we look for in our stars and our awarded performances? Uniqueness, quirkiness, the unexpected. That's what you won't get. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. James Cameron, thank you so much for sharing this time with us on the SAG-AFTRA podcast. Appreciate
That's been great.
you.
Yeah, we went to all kinds of cool places.
We did.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Duncan.